Hey y'all, it's your friend D, and in my previous video, I shared with you how I made a witch's broom and wand shop inside a faux box from the Dollar Tree. And in that video, I shared with you guys the technique that I used to make the walls of the shop is the same technique that I used to make this tree. And several of you guys said that you wanted me to do a tutorial on how to make just the tree. So that's what we're going to do today. When I made this tree, I didn't film it. I wasn't going to film anything that particular day. My whole plan was to just come into my craft room and just kind of de-stress and basically use up some leftover foam board that I had. And I wasn't sure if I was actually going to make a tree starting out. And I made this tree to where I can change out the leaves at the top. These are just floral picks from the Dollar Tree. And I have several different ones. These are the ones that I use for fall. They have the orange leaves on them also with some lighter green. And I have other colors for spring and summer. The trunk of the tree is just made from a cardboard tube. And you can get these from paper towel rolls. I think this one came from aluminum foil, or you might call it tin foil. And this one is 12 inches long. And I think that's the same length as my tree. So my tree trunk is about the same height as a Ken doll. But if you want a taller tree, you can definitely find the tubes in longer lengths. This one is 24 inches long, and it is a little bit thinner or narrower across than this one. I always have so many pieces of scrap foam board left over from other projects. This is the reason why I made this tree. I was just trying to come up with a way to use these scraps. So I'm going to show you how I achieved this look with foam board. So we're going to start making the base of the tree. And I took some of my larger pieces of scrap foam and I made some triangles with them in various sizes. So some are larger than others, and it all depends on how far out you want your base to come. So I want the base of this tree to be pretty wide, and I do believe this is called an obtuse triangle. So I'm going to be lining these up around the base. And just a quick note, you want to keep in mind weight distribution. When I made this one, I wasn't thinking about that, and I got lucky that when I added this branch, it didn't add too much weight to the top to where it tips over. Somehow I managed to get it where it stands up perfectly on its own. But looking at it now, I definitely would have made my base a little bit wider just to make sure any branches that I put up top did not make the tree top heavy. So I have my first pieces of foam board put on, and I did decide as an afterthought to kind of curve my triangles a little bit. The first one I made, I left them straight, but I just thought we'll try this. And I would suggest you put at least 3 pieces for your base. I decided to put 5. So I have 2 larger ones and 1 medium and 2 smaller ones. Not sure if I can get a good angle on that, but that's what it looks like from the bottom. So now we have to make these a little bit wider. And we're going to do that by just layering more foam board on these pieces. And this is what it's looking like. I did get a little sloppy with the glue, but that's okay. It's going to be covered up. And I did make the larger pieces wider. I just felt like those would lead to a larger root into the ground. And I only added 1 to this one, and I think that's going to be okay. And over on this smaller one, I added 1 on each side. At this point, if you're wanting to add a branch or 2 on the tree, this is where you figure out where that needs to go. Also, if you wanted to add, I think it's called a tree knot. I'll put a picture on the screen. But anything like that, you want to figure that out now. And also you could add a hole into the trunk of the tree. Maybe a squirrel family or a raccoon lives inside of your tree. For this tree, I'm going to make my branch a lot shorter, and I'm going to start off the same way that we started with the base, with 1 piece of foam board. And this was cut into a rectangle, and I just cut one side at an angle. And that's going to lean against our tree trunk like this. And I do want, for mine, I want it to be lined up with the top like that. I don't want this higher than the top of my tree. I would prefer it to be like this, but you can place yours wherever you want to. If you want the branch a little bit lower and maybe you have another one on this side, you can do that. Just like we did on the bottom of the tree, we're going to start building this up by adding more pieces of foam board. So I think I have a good size for my branch. I might have went a little bit too thick on it, but that's okay. And I love this project for using a lot of these little bitty scraps of foam board because I can add them on, and it's just going to help to add texture to this project. I took some more scrap foam board and I cut them into strips, and they're not all perfect. So you have some that look like that and some that look like this, and they're different sizes. So I'm going to take these and start putting them on my tree. I'm going to start at the bottom and fill in any gaps that I left down here at the base. So I might put that one in that space, and then I'm just going to start putting them in random places on my tree. So I have a layer of foam board on, and you can see I did leave some gaps, so I didn't completely cover the cardboard tube, and that's just going to help give it some more texture. And I am going to go back in some areas, maybe right here where it's coming off of this larger root system. I might layer some foam board on top of these pieces just to make that protrude out just a little bit more. Now that I have all my pieces on my tree, I'm ready to use the Mod Podge. And you can see I did put the foam board all the way around. I left some gaps, and then in other gaps I used smaller pieces like here and here. So you can do something like that, or if you don't want as many gaps, you can fill those in. And I did layer up on some of the pieces, but not much of that. So for this portion, I'm using Mod Podge, and this is the gloss. There's also a matte Mod Podge and a satin. It does not matter which one you use for this. You can also use regular school glue for this craft. Typically we see this in white, but I just happen to have this one on hand, and it goes on purple and dries clear. The brand doesn't matter, but I know here in the US, we typically think of Elmer school glue when we think of this, just from our childhood, but you can get a generic brand and it should work just fine. I lost the footage of me explaining why I'm using toilet paper for this craft. It's basically because of the great toilet paper shortage of 2020. I got stuck with some not so great toilet paper, so yeah, I'm just using it for crafts. But of course, you don't have to use toilet paper. You can use either paper towel or the tissue paper that is used to wrap gifts. So I'm going to take some of my Mod Podge on an old brush and just start brushing it on, making sure I'm getting in between all of the foam board, all into the nooks and crannies. And then of course on top of it, and we're going to work in small sections because you don't want this to start drying too much on you. And once I have enough on, I'll just take some of my tissue paper and put it on, and I can even go over the top of it with some more Mod Podge and make sure that it gets down in there. And you don't want to smooth this out too much. You want it to be a little just kind of rumpled, and yeah, so kind of like this. If you can see, it's not completely smooth, so you want it to bunch it up just a little bit, especially in those little crevices. Here's what it's looking like so far. You can see I left quite a bit of wrinkles in the toilet paper. You don't want to smooth those out. That's going to give your tree some texture. So here's without the toilet paper. Here's with. My Mod Podge is dry, and now I'm going to cover the entire thing in black paint. So my black paint is dry, and I think I got it in all of the nooks and crannies. I see a little spot maybe there and there, so I'll touch those up. Now let's talk about the other colors we're going to use on our tree. The first one is this dark brown, and I mixed all of these myself. This is just a brown paint mixed with a little bit of black until I got the desired brown that I wanted. The next one is this light brown, and this is almost like a taupe or an almond color, and this is just brown paint mixed with white. And I don't need a lot of this because this is just going to be used for highlighting. Next, I have this moss green, and this color is really easy to make. You just need a green like this one from the Dollar Tree, and just add red and white paint until you get a shade that you like. There is another combination that you can use to get this. Since I just told you it's just green, red, and white, and we know that red and white makes pink. So I had a lot of this kind of a hot pink left over from when I made the motel, and I used this to actually get my moss green. The first time I mixed it, I did use red and white, but I figured why not give this a shot since this is just red and white mixed together, and it gave me the color I wanted. When you're covering with your brown, I just wanted to show you it's okay if some of the areas you leave the black, especially in the recessed areas like this. You can still see some of the black paint. I didn't go heavy inside of there with the brown. I have my brown paint on and I'm letting it dry, but you're probably wondering why are there two trees and why do they look different? So this is the one that we've been working on, and you can see I did leave some large gaps between my foam board because I wanted those little recessed areas. But on this one, I placed my foam board closer together. There's still some recessed areas, but I didn't want them as pronounced as on this piece. And on this tree, I used the toilet paper, and it looks like it has a lot of texture, but it really doesn't. I have it layered up right now, so if I unfold it, you can see it's pretty thin and it doesn't give you a lot of texture when you put it on. So I had to make sure I let it wrinkle up, and that's why it's important to do that. It gives you some texture on your tree. And on this tree, I used the paper towel. This paper towel is a lot thicker than the toilet paper, and it has a lot more texture. So you can see all the little pockets are showing up in the paper towel. And I did let it wrinkle in some areas just to add some extra texture, but it just gives the tree a different look. So for time's sake, we'll continue working on this one, and at the end, I'll show you how they both compare. Now I'm going to go in with my green, and I don't need a lot of it. So I'm going to take some off and just get a light coating on my brush. And I'll take my brush and just figure out where I want some spots of green. So some will be bigger than others. As my green started to dry, I realized the color was not drying to what I wanted. This is actually the second batch of this green moss that I've made. The first batch that I made for the original tree, I used it all up. So when I made this, I thought it was the same color, but I was a little bit off on my mixture. And instead of mixing an entirely new batch, I just took some of that green that I originally used to make that, and I'm just mixing some on my craft paper here just to brighten this color up because it's almost drying a greenish gray, and I want it to be a little bit brighter. So I'm just going to blend it until I get a color I want. And if it gets too bright, I'll just go back in with a little bit of that original color until it starts looking like I want it. And the good thing is that we are making a tree, and not every little green patch on a tree is going to be exactly the same. So this should work out. Now we're going to take our dark brown color, and we're just going to get a little bit on our brush. And I do think I forgot to show you guys this step when I made the shop, but it still came out good. I just forgot to do it. But I'm going to get just a little bit on my brush, and all of these green areas that I put on, I'm going to blend those just a little bit. I'm not trying to cover them up, but I just want to blend it in, and I'll go over it just a little bit with it. It would just make it not stand out so much. You'll still get some of that vibrant green through the brown. So this area of green, I did blend a little bit of brown paint around the edges and over the top of it. And I think that makes it look a little bit more natural. But over here, you can see this spot, it just looks like a green spot on the tree. So once I start blending it, it'll just tone that green down just a little bit. So I'm gonna go around the edges some and then lightly over it. And I think that helps to tone that down just a little bit. Now I'm going to take my lighter color and use it to highlight some of my raised edges. I'm just going to get a little bit of it on my brush. Tap it off. And just lightly brush along some of these edges. So I'm not really trying to paint over what I've already done with the brown and green. I'm just lightly brushing it. And I can always go back and add a little bit more if I need to. Here are the trees, and the middle one is the one that I showed you in this video that I worked on. And compared to the first one, there is a noticeable difference. With the first one, I do believe I worked the toilet paper a little bit more to make sure it was wrinkled and gave me a lot more texture. With this one, I wanted to have a lot more of these little crevices, the larger crevices in it, so I spaced out the foam board a little more. I do like it. It's just a different looking tree. And with the third one, I explained to you guys that I used the paper towel instead of the toilet paper. When you look closely at the one that I did with toilet paper and the one that I did with the paper towel, I really don't care for the texture that was left by the paper towel. I think it's a little bit too much. It's too uniform. So I definitely have to make sure I wrinkle that up a little bit more if I use this paper towel again. And because of the way I made the base of the trees, they can all stand on their own. And of course I left the tops open, so I have the option to add some foliage if I want to and give my tree some leaves. Keep in mind that the cardboard paper towel tubes are about 12 inches tall. So if you have a Kindle, it's going to be the same height as the top of your tree, so you have to be very strategic with your filming. If you can't find a longer roll like the one I got from a poster, I would just tape 2 of these together and it would still work. So my friends, let me know what you think about my DIY trees, and if you have any questions about anything in this video, please leave it in the comments below. I will try my best to answer your questions. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and turn on your notifications. I'll see you next time, my friends. Bye-bye.